This is PORCFEST 2025, Thorium, the rest of the story, and this is part one, how I became intrigued. First of all, a little bit of myself. My name is Michael Brakey. Quick bio. University of Maine, Orono, Bachelor of Science in Engineering Physics, nuclear minor, 1975. I worked on a thesis, turned into a manuscript, another yesterday, the impact of a nuclear accident on future world events. Wrote this in 1976, a couple of years before 3 Mile Island. Then another thesis in 79, Cosmic Orphan, sequel, 79, again, with the focus on the importance of abundant, cheap, clean energy. Went to Baldwin Wallace College while working in manufacturing in Berea, Ohio. Received a executive MBA, 1998, strategic planning and marketing. While spending the 2 years working on this as well with some other things, one of my theses was big oil dictates prices whenever they hit 90% production capacity. Ended up with 50 years in the energy industry, plus international joint ventures abroad, mostly in Japan, traveled throughout Europe and the world. Uh, 6 U.S. and international patents involving energy technology. Founded two Ohio energy consulting firms beginning in 1999, after 23 years with a manufacturing corporation. Became the winner of the University of Maine Francis Crowe Society Award as a lifetime distinguished engineer, in part due to my energy exploits. I gained an Ohio reputation as a Sherlock Holmes of solving energy mysteries over my career. And the biggest challenge came in 2011. I was asked if I could investigate a real life global changing energy mystery from the 1950s and 60s by the Thorium Foundation of Ohio. Now, what was it? What was the mystery? The mystery I was asked to investigate centered around the rediscovery of a remarkable thorium energy technology which replicated the geothermal process heating the interior of our planet for billions of years. The element thorium 232 is as plentiful as tin and lead and helps to heat the interior of our planet to 10,832 degrees Fahrenheit. And as I alluded, it's so abundant, it's as abundant as tin, lead, and thorium are each the 49th most abundant element on Earth. There's plenty of it to go around. And as seen here, a bowling ball of thorium has as much energy as a supertanker of oil. This geothermal technology was first successfully operated at atmospheric pressure in a liquefied thorium pool of molten salts in 1953. This was phase one of an ongoing project they have. In fact, here's a photograph from February 24th, 1953, where they were looking over this technology. Why was phase two of the technology found hidden behind a laboratory wall 3 decades later? It was rumored the sudden death of the technology sponsor led to the inventor abandoning his work due to conflicts within new management. If you remember, that was the story told in Atlas Shrugged at 20th Century Motor Company, where the owner died and the offspring took over. I went to work investigating the disappearance of the geothermal atmospheric liquefied thorium energy technology by first tracking down both the inventor and the inventor's antagonists. I then researched their entire 20th century lives. As of 2022, downloading and archiving to date over almost 20,000 magazine articles, periodicals, videos, and Freedom of Information Act requests involving the 20th century, I had accumulated about over 100 gigabytes of hard drive memory. Tracking down and purchasing scores of out-of-print books, as seen as an example here. I was surprised when my research obliged me to begin investigating the author Ayn Rand for reasons to be cited later. And here's just some of the works of Ayn Rand I used to further my investigation. Remember, an autopsy is a surgical procedure that consists of a thorough examination of a corpse by dissection to determine the cause, mode, and manner of death. It appears a perfect crime went undetected for over 3 decades and would have likely continued but for the fact the false laboratory wall was constructed with such haste no one even had time to clean out the chemical reactor itself and prep it for long-term entombment. If they had cleaned it out at the time, in the early 70s, it would have been $50,000 to clean up phase 2 equipment. They didn't touch it. When it was rediscovered, it cost over $50 million to clean out all the contaminated material 3 decades later. Here's 1965 Oak Ridge Phase 2 GALT chemical reactor, tens of billions in U.S. tax funding to get this far. And here's a 5-minute autopsy of the perfect crime. A dozen years after Phase 1 testing, as can be seen by the technician above, you can see the scope and size of this equipment. He is actually standing on the vault that will contain the salts and so forth underneath. Phase 2 testing had been scaled up 50-fold to 7,500 kilowatts per hour from the 150 in 1953. These tests proved just as successful as Phase 1 testing, which had taken place back in 1953. In fact, here's a photograph. In 1969, GALT trials break 6,000 continuous hours of operation in 1969. There was ample evidence the tests were highly successful. The technology was almost ready for commercialization by the early 1970s, and yet, on September 21, 1972, a fraudulent document, WASH 1222, stealthily appeared in the official laboratory files. Should the nuclear industry implode at some future date with the light water pressurized uranium reactors, do not consider revisiting thorium technology, it was found in the report. The WASH 1222 report stated the thorium experiment had been an abject failure, a waste of money and time. Now, what did Wikipedia report concerning the successful thorium chemical reactor behind a laboratory wall since the 1960s? Here's what I pulled off of Wikipedia recently. It said, and it may be hard for you to see, but I'll read it here. In 1968, Nobel laureate and discoverer of plutonium, Glenn Seaborg, publicly announced to the Atomic Energy Commission of which he was chairman, that the thorium-based reactor had been successfully developed and tested. That that's contrary to the fraudulent report. Now here's Glenn Seaborg. I'm throwing some pictures up here because it's going to be important. These images will pop up later in this discussion. Here's a picture of him actually at the control panels of the GALT chemical reactor, which he himself admitted was highly successful in 1968. Once launched, it operated into 1969 and broke 6,000 hours of continuous operation at one point. Who was Seaborg's boss and champion of this technology? I ask this because we're not dealing with middle management on this during the 20th century. It's far more important than that. His boss was John F. Kennedy, the president. A bullet later, it was Lyndon Baines Johnson. And after that, it was Richard M. Nixon. In 1973, however, the U.S. government shut down all thorium-related nuclear research. This would have been during President Johnson's term immediately after Kennedy. Was merely scheduled to shut down. Essentially, it was scheduled for a shutdown at midnight, December 31st, 1969, and it was never turned on again. In Wikipedia, it says it was an excusable mistake, just incompetence, government at its worst. Only after the technology was rediscovered does the public learn the inventor was fired 25 years earlier. As highlighted here, the nuclear physicist Alvin Weinberg, who was director of Oak Ridge and primarily responsible for the new reactor, lost his job as director because he championed the development of the safer thorium reactors. And here's a picture of Alvin Weinberg, born 1915, passed away in 2006. It was stated here, and I'll read it because it's hard to see. Congressman Chet Holyfield was clearly exasperated with me, and he finally blurted out, "Alvin, if you are concerned about safety of reactors, then I think it may be time for you to leave the nuclear energy industry." Alvin wrote in his book, "I was speechless. But it was apparent to me that my style, my attitude, and my perception of the future was no longer in tune with the powers within the AEC, the Atomic Energy Commission." And here is the gentleman who fired Alvin Weinberg, Chester Holyfield, who his career is as a haberdasher before he came in, a clothing salesman. And when he was told to leave Congress in 74, he returned to becoming a haberdasher. But the way they paint up empty suit guys, here was the book, Chet Holyfield, Master Legislator and Nuclear Statesman. Thanks to Robert Oppenheimer's introduction, Senator John F. Kennedy learns of Weinberg's invention, which could end the nuclear arms race and the age of fossil fuels by the end of the 20th century. Here's a picture. We're digressing to the 1950s. Here, Alvin Weinberg is discussing his technology with Senator John F. Kennedy. President JFK made the inventor his scientific advisor, and John F. Kennedy championed thorium reactors in the early 1960s against all protests of the military industrial complex and those people in Congress who I contend and can show were controlled by the oil industry. Congressman Holyfield and Vice President Johnson were ordered to kill this invention because, well, here's a picture of President Kennedy with his two arch rivals or vipers. Holyfield comes from California, and he came from a panorama of the oil fields that covered his district. As I show here, this was Holyfield's Los Angeles Congressional District 19. And here is LBJ, Texas oil boom, downtown Derricks, both heavily involved with the oil industry. Johnson's Texas U.S. Senate interests. Just 8 days after President JFK's burial, Lyndon Baines Johnson calls Chester Holyfield from the White House to wish him a happy birthday and grant him the wish of reorganizing management at the inventor's government laboratory. Within a few months of the phone call you're going to listen to, Holyfield changes the laboratory priorities and leadership. To not raise suspicion, it would take a decade to ultimately shut down the threatening thorium technology to oil and dismiss the inventor. Here's the phone call. And note here, the smoking gun White House phone call, December 3rd, 1963. When I came across this, I immediately archived it and took pictures because I knew as soon as I'd ever speak of it, it would disappear. And that is what's happened. Here's Lyndon Baines Johnson, the president, calling up the true power, which was Chester Holyfield. And it occurred, the call was 19 on the day at 12:02. Here we go.
Congressman Holyfield, 2191.
Yes, hello, Mr. President.
How you doing?
I'm pretty good.
Happy birthday to you.
Thank you very much.
I just wanted you to know I was thinking of my chief nominator, and I just wanted to wish you many happy returns of the day.
Well, thank you very much. I know how busy you've been, and I want you to know how proud I've been of the way you've been handling yourself.
I saw you all during my speech at the joint session the other day.
Well, I was also down yesterday at this affair for
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
and but I didn't bother to speak with you. Sometime pretty soon, Senator Anderson, Senator Pastore, and Mel Price and I want to come down and spend a few minutes with you talking about this overall atomic energy program.
Be glad to. We'll work it out.
And we'll work something out. And I appreciate very much your call.
Thank you, Jim. Bye.
Are you through? Waiting.
Now, in that phone call where, imagine just a few days after the assassination of Kennedy, that Johnson is calling Holyfield up and essentially groveling to him. Oh, I saw you do this and I saw you do that. And then at the end of the message, the true information came out. It was that sometime Holyfield said to the president, we got to get together with Proxmire and some others, and we've got to address the Atomic Energy Commission. And that ultimate call and what occurred later would cost the United States almost $1 trillion a year from 1974 on, but that's to be discussed in the future. What came of it after Johnson refused to go for a second term and Nixon took over, on March 29, 1971, both are flying home to Los Angeles oil industry. On Nixon's plane, Holyfield invited himself onto it. And there, the head of state, Chet Holyfield, instructs President Nixon he must do the following: promote the inferior nuclear industry with uranium and pressurized light water reactors, create the EPA to help drive manufacturing to China, replace gold-backed Federal Reserve notes with the petrodollar. Now that they've stopped GALT from proceeding, which would have obsoleted the oil industry, now they can continue on with their plans, which were to eventually go off the gold-backed currency and use oil. That would have all failed if GALT had gone forward. Once this was accomplished, President Nixon is forced to resign by August of 1974. Congressman Holyfield is one of several members of Congress ordered to pass a law prohibiting any further thorium research. These politicians were then ordered to announce their own retirements by the end of 1974. Just as a side note, 10 years later, we're talking 74, where all these people retired. In 1984, unknown to the general American public and never mentioned in history books, is the fact that in 1984, a Texas Franklin County grand jury had officially indicted and found Lyndon Johnson guilty as co-conspirator in the following 8 murders as listed below.
Corruption. The full extent of Johnson's criminal activity only began to unravel 11 years after his death. In 1984, at this courthouse in Franklin, Texas, a former Johnson business associate, Billy Celestes, appeared before a grand jury.
According to Billy Celestes, there were 8 murders perpetrated on the part of Lyndon Johnson. The first name was a man named Douglas Kinzer. That was followed by a number of men involved in Estes businesses who were corrupt, and they were all killed with carbon monoxide. Josepha Johnson's name is listed on this Justice Department document. That's Lyndon Johnson's sister. So Estes is accusing the Vice President of the United States of murdering his own sister. And the 8th name listed is the President of the United States, John F. Kennedy. And then there is a promise of knowing more. And if Billy Celestes is telling the truth, and there is every reason to believe he is, it gives you an idea of the depth of the corruption and the ruthlessness of Lyndon Johnson.
What history reports 50 years after the disappearance of the thorium chemical reactors? Again, I pointed out these pictures earlier. Here's the inventor, Alvin M. Weinberg. Here is his main nemesis, Chester E. Holyfield from California, Los Angeles, big oil. Here again, we showed his image earlier, Glenn Seaborg, who's running the atomic energy industry. He's chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission at the time. And he has a sister. The brother runs the atomic energy industry, Jeanette Seaborg, who was a little bit younger than Glenn. Reasons I point this out, I'll show you a little later. Anyway, it just so happens Alvin Weinberg's biggest nemesis, who ultimately fires him, is 12 years older. Glenn Seaborg is 3 years older than Alvin Weinberg. And there's essentially a 1-year difference between Alvin Weinberg and Glenn Seaborg's sister. Oh, and she, over her lifetime, she had many husbands, four of them, I believe. Reasons I point this out you'll notice later. Well, I was telling my son Eric about this after I had done my presentation to the Thorium Foundation, who the players were, where the equipment was found, yada, yada, yada. And I was feeling pretty proud of myself that my investigation, I could go back over the 50, 60 years and sort all this out. And he said to me, "That's great, Dad, but there was an author who figured this all out before you. As you told me your story, I've heard it all before. Have you ever heard of Ayn Rand?" I said, didn't she do the Fountainhead or something? He said, yeah, and she also wrote a book called Atlas Shrugged. He says, you talked about how this technology that worked at atmospheric pressure would have ended the petroleum age, and it was found hidden behind a laboratory wall and so on and so forth. He says, well, you might want to read the book. You're going to find out there's a lot of coincidences here. And so I read the book, and here's some of the things I noticed. Okay, here is John Galt. And in all references to the book as they've analyzed it, they kind of use him as a Jesus Christ, and he's year zero, and people are either older and younger, and the descriptions of them are based on personalities and so forth. Anyway, John Galt had a nemesis. His name was Mr. Thompson, the inventor's antagonist. He happens to be 12 years older than John Galt. Interesting coincidence. And then we had the gentleman who runs the railroad industry, James Taggart. Recall again, Glenn Seaborg essentially runs the atomic energy industry. Well, and looky. They're 3 years, he's 3 years older than John Galt, and Glenn Seaborg was kind of called he was 6'8". He was called the pygmy of safety industry for the nuclear industry. Whenever anyone came to him, including Elvin Weinberg, and he would try to tell Glenn Seaborg about safety issues, he would say essentially, I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to hear about it. Someone will figure it out in the future. Well, when you get to James Taggart, if those of you who have read it, when anyone came to him with a problem, he would say, I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to hear about it. Someone else will take care of it. Amazing coincidence there. And then we had Dagny Taggart, who was essentially a year difference in age, although in the book she's a year younger than John Galt. And in real life, Jeanette was a year older than Alvin Weinberg. But again, a year difference. Oh, and as anyone knows who's read the book, Dagny Taggart had a lot of lovers. Was that all the coincidences? No, more appear to arise. Rand's Atlas Shrugged is about the rediscovery of a remarkable invention which was found hidden behind a secret laboratory wall, which has been taken over by incompetent management after the death of its owner. And we have this, here's a frame from Atlas Shrugged's epic novel and movie, Atlas Shrugged. Dagny Taggart and Hank Reardon discover energy technology which provides endless supply of clean electricity at atmospheric pressures, just like the GALT chemical reactor would. This technology could operate, as I said, at atmospheric pressure. Conflicts within new management led to the inventor walking away from his invention at 20th Century Motors, if you recall, when the owner died and the children took over. This invention is found decades later by two of the major heroes of the novel, Dagny Taggart and Hank Reardon. So we have Alvin Weinberg and we have Robert Oppenheimer, essentially known for the atomic bomb. Oh, and note, Robert Oppenheimer is 11 years older than Alvin Weinberg. Plus, there's a problem 9-year-old younger brother named Frank with respect to Oppenheimer. If any of you saw the movie, the brother Frank had joined the Communist Party while Oppenheimer resisted it, but it was a big issue for Robert that his brother Frank had joined. Well, if we bring into Ayn Rand's side, we find here again is John Galt, and again he's essentially the Jesus Christ, the benchmark 0 year for all the other characters, and we have Reardon Medals, Hank Reardon, and lo and behold, he is 11 years older than the inventor. Just like Oppenheimer was 11 years older than Alvin Weinberg. And lo and behold, in Atlas Shrugged, Hank Reardon has a younger brother by 9 years named Philip, who is one of the moochers and looters of the book. With that, we'll do a short break.